Hi, my name is Cécile Baumann and I'm your host and the founder of the company Ganz in Bewegung. I'm a movement and Alexander technique specialist. My business serves holistic thinking people who want to improve their mind-body connection. In today's interview, we're looking at neurodivergence, especially ADHD, not as something to fix, but as something to understand more deeply through the nervous system, the body, and relationships. I'm very happy to welcome Abigail Jankowitz from Synaps, who works systemically with families and combines professional expertise with lived experience. But before I bring her up, I want to share what I mean by mind-body connection. The Ganz in Bewegung system we developed includes 7 defining components of being human. For non-German speakers, the meaning of Ganz in Bewegung is the whole of you in motion, which includes your movement, your body, your surrounding, your experience, your emotion, your thinking, and it's all connected with your breathing and all is interconnected with each other. Abigail Jankowitz is an ADHD coach at Synaps, specializing in coaching children and supporting families navigating ADHD and nervous system challenges. As a certified ADHD clinical services provider, her work is grounded in evidence-based, systems-focused practice. Her background also spans years in hospitality and childcare, including work as a full-time au pair and nanny, which shaped a deep attunement to children and family dynamics. As someone with ADHD herself, Abigail brings lived experience alongside structure, boundaries, and science-led practice, helping individuals and families move from self-blame toward practical, compassionate systems that foster regulation and connection. Synaps is a Swiss-based practice helping adults, couples, teens, and children move from overwhelm to clarity and confidence. Our work is grounded in the principle that regulation comes before anything else. If you have any questions you like to ask Abigail, please contact her directly. Now, let's bring her up here. Welcome, Abigail. Great to have you here today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, what a pleasure. I mean, I will just quickly, guide people also to the talk with your mom,
Sure.
if that's fine for you. Otherwise, I cut it
Yeah, of
out.
course. Absolutely.
Okay. So I had your mom a while ago, the money magician, and I will bring the, link down under the interview, just as a
Okay.
side note, because you're also a money coach yourself. So you learned from the peak on everything about
Yeah.
money yourself, but now you changed, you swifted your whole way of working 100% now for Synaps. And I think you are such a great match. You and Kelly, it's such a nice dream team. What has your lived experience with ADHD taught you that no training alone could?
So training has given me the framework and the lived experience has given me the feeling sense. So I know what it feels like to look completely capable on the outside while you're having to work 4 times harder than everyone else just to keep up. And I know what masking actually costs you, what that feels like in your body at the end of the day. And no certification actually teaches you that. So my own ADHD has taught me about that gap and, how enormous that actually feels and what that looks like. Most families are actually living inside that gap and haven't had anyone be able to name it for them. When I work with clients, we are not just applying models and frameworks. I actually understand what that exhaustion looks like of trying to make the brain do something that it wasn't wired to do.
Was there a moment where your perspective on neurodivergence shifted?
So definitely, and it was a big one, but it started even earlier than that for me with my own story. So my own ADHD was only picked up when I was 22 years old. And when it was finally caught, the process was basically an assessment, a diagnosis, and a prescription. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. No one sat me down and said, "Hey, here's how your brain works. Here's what's actually happening when you struggle. Here's how to work with it, not against it. And I think that experience has probably been the biggest reason why this work is so personal to me. Because I know what it feels like to be able to finally have a label and still have absolutely no idea what to do with it. So that real shift for me was moving away from thinking of ADHD as a list of symptoms and understanding it as a nervous system that is in a constant state of regulation and dysregulation. And when you see it like that, everything starts to change, and you start seeing that the behavior isn't actually a problem, it's a signal. So this could look like, a child melting down and then realizing, okay, the child's not being difficult. They are running out of capacity. It could look like a parent who snaps and yells. That's not them being a bad parent. They dysregulated too. So when we shift from, you know, what is wrong with this person to what does their system actually need, that's the foundation of everything and where we start to see real change.
Wow, yes. So that shifts a lot, because most of the time we are asking, what's wrong?
Yeah.
And once you start to change only the question, even, that it's not something wrong, it's just dysregulation. They
Hmm.
don't do it on purpose, it's just too much to
Yeah,
cope with.
exactly.
And to ask, what does the system need? Yes.
So everything changes when we change that question. So when we ask, what is wrong, it's like we're putting that person on trial. We're looking for a deficit to fix, but ADHD is not a deficit of intelligence or of willpower. It's the difference in how the nervous system regulates its attention, its emotion, its energy, and its time. So when we switch that question with families, they become more curious instead of corrective, and they start looking at what is the environment demanding versus what can the system actually do right now? And that's a completely different conversation. Um, and I often see it change the relationship between a parent and a child almost immediately. Suddenly, no one's the enemy anymore, So it really does have an impactful shift. Another thing that we look at is 12 domains of regulation. So these include things like emotional regulation, stress regulation, time perception, our working memory, our sleep, our sensory processing. And when families can look at which domains are the most depleted, they stop taking the behavior so personally and start actually problem solving together.
That sounds so interesting. So you go through all those 12 aspects
So
with
not
the
obviously
parent.
all at the same time. I think a lot
Mhm.
of the times with ADHD is there's so much going on already. So you don't want to introduce too many new concepts like all at once that it feels even more overwhelming. So it's depending on that specific set of kind of struggles or challenges that are coming up. We'll look at, where are we being flagged and kind of directed in terms of this is a good starting point. But yeah, we would go through all 12 if that was necessary.
Mhm. How do you explain ADHD to parents in a way that actually helps them respond differently? I mean, you told it already, but
Hmm.
for outsiders, probably, how do you address if you notice a parent with an ADHD child and just to say, I understand, cannot
Hmm.
understand what you're going through, but I understand that your child has difficulties in this and this. Some a quick way of saying, I'm informed and I know that it's
Hmm.
difficult, probably sometimes, not
Yeah.
so.
I think I would usually start by talking about capacity And this really tends to land well. So every person with ADHD or without ADHD is going to have a regulation capacity. And you can think of that like a battery. So people with ADHD, that battery is going to drain so much faster because their nervous system is working harder on things that come a lot more automatically for people who don't have ADHD. Um, we also look at, what are the four main depleters for ADHD? So this is our sleep quality, our stress load, sensory overload. We look at immune and inflammatory burdens. So if a child gets home from school, um, that battery is often approaching empty. And so an after school meltdown is not necessarily defiance, it's the result of their system has tried to hold it together the entire day, and it's finally feeling like it has permission to fall apart. So that's what I try and help parents understand.
And what does regulation looks like in daily life for ADHD people?
So it's probably not what you'd expect, but it's such an important one. Regulation is not calm. And I think a lot of people hear that word and they think quiet and still. But for someone with ADHD, their nervous system, that regulation just means that person is within their window of capacity. So it's when they have that ability to think, to learn, to connect, to respond. So in daily life, regulation could look like a child being able to hear the word no without a 20-minute meltdown. Could look like a parent who is able to pause before they react. Maybe it's a teenager who can start a task without needing four reminders. So it's not about being perfect, it's just about having enough capacity in the system to function. One more thing here, which is actually super important, is using zone language with families, and they find it very helpful. So we use different colors to explain where we're at and what that capacity looks like. So blue would be a very low state of alertness. So they might be feeling disconnected or just kind of checked out. Green is very focused, calm. That's when there's learning and connection happening. And we've got yellow. So this is a heightened state of alertness. So we've got emotions arising, things are getting a little bit more intense, maybe a little bit jittery or irritable. And then our last color for our zone reference is red. And so red is an extreme state of overstimulation. And this is where we see those big meltdowns, those explosions, or just completely shutting down. So when you know which zone you're in or which zone your child is in, you can respond differently. And you can realize, okay, if someone's in the red zone, the first thing that we need to prioritize here is safety and connection. So yeah, that's definitely something that helps.
I mean, that helps so many people. It's not only people, neurodivergent people, but it's
Hmm.
really actually everybody has those
Yeah,
zones, yes.
exactly. So
But
yeah,
it's
being able
just
to
because,
name it.
yeah, and it's just
Mm.
because ADHD um, challenged people are more shifting. I think, they are have a constant up and
Hmm.
down and going everywhere, and it can
Yeah.
shift from one to the other in a second. And I
Hmm.
think that's why it's so good to know, oh, yeah, before you were in green, but now already red. So what
Yeah,
happened there in between?
exactly.
Probably not so much, but it's just because before was already a lot. They were
Yeah.
probably not at the green zone, but in the yellow already, and I didn't
Hmm.
notice. So it's good to I like this
Good.
way of thinking about also emotions, how
Yeah.
to wonderful. Can you share two, three simple tools parents or individuals can use in the moment? Like
Sure.
when they are
So
red, you said
yeah.
connection. That's a good one, but how does connection looks like? I mean, or do you have other tools?
So I mean, definitely with the color zones, one great thing is, doing a zone check-in. So before trying to solve anything, asking yourself, what zone are we in? making that part of the family language. So a child can say, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm in yellow," rather than exploding. And that's given us an opportunity to see regulation happening in real time. So a parent could even say, "Hey, I feel like I'm in yellow. I need 5 more minutes before we can talk about this." And that really helps family dynamics, kind of see and experience that change. Another one would be a 90-second pause. So this is when you feel like you're noticing that your emotions are rising, when you may be approaching a yellow zone. So you're not at red yet, you're approaching yellow, and you just stop and you say nothing for the next 90 seconds. You take 2 or 3 deep, slow breaths. And the idea is not that we are suppressing our emotions, but science actually tells us that, if we don't feed that emotional wave with more thoughts, it's going to peak and it's going to begin to pass within 90 seconds. And that pause is often the difference between saying something that you're going to regret or being able to respond from a calmer place. So I would say definitely those are two pretty simple tools that, you can kind of implement immediately and it can give you quite a good quick result.
That's so interesting. In Alexander terms, Alexander technique, what I'm teaching, we have also this pause.
Mm-hmm.
Pause before you do anything. We
Yeah.
we learned it 3 year long. We pause, we
Mm-hmm.
think, we prepare, and then we let it happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is quite a training, and I think for people with ADHD, it's quite hard at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
being in this calm state. So how do you bring those kids to this to really do the pause? The pause can also be active, or just not
Exactly.
saying something, but you
Yeah.
can move, you can jump, but just
100%.
okay, because I think
Yeah.
just being calm and not being allowed to say or do anything. So it's not about controlling, isn't it?
Mm-mm.
It's
And
not
I
the
think
behavior control. It's
no, and I think it's also, I think sometimes kids, they're so quick to react. And kind of reminding them, one of the things I like to do with the kids that I coach is I tell them they have to create imaginary pause buttons somewhere in their body. And I'm like, physically press it, don't hurt yourself, but press it as though it's a button and send that signal to your brain that, like, I'm just creating an interruption before a reaction. And, you know, is my initial idea of how I was going to respond going to make things better or worse? And it's just kind of given a little bit of time between that execution of, being in those heightened zones where things are escalating, that you can kind of bring it back before it, you know, gets worse. So,
yeah, it's empowerment. Yes, it's
mm,
kind of inner control system, that you
yeah.
are in charge of how you want to express yourself, and that you're
Hmm.
not emotionally depend. You're actually independent a little bit
Hmm.
of your emotions. You can handle them better. That's a
Exactly.
great tool. I like it.
Good.
What role does the body play in ADHD or regulation from your perspective?
So the body and the brain are not separate systems. I like to think that one of the most important things to understand about ADHD is that the body is part of the regulation. So when we've got a nervous system that is under stress, you're going to see it in the body. You'll see it with shallow breathing, maybe tension in the shoulders, restlessness, bad posture, or it could be the opposite. So we could have complete shutdown and collapse. In ADHD, the cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that has control over energy, coordination, regulation, that part is often very underfunctioning. And that can show up as poor body awareness. So it makes physical coordination more difficult. It makes managing your energy levels more difficult. So a child that's not sitting still and refusing to sit still is not being disrespectful. Their body's actually trying to regulate their brain through movement. So when we understand that, we stop fighting the movement, we can actually start working with it. And that tends to be very, very helpful and important to understand.
Do you also let them jump up and down, till they are feeling a little bit tired and or not?
Not in the sessions I do with them because we do it over Zoom. But I mean, one of the things, if they're talking too much or they're kind of finding it hard to focus or to sit still, we'll kind of say, sit on your hands, and just kind of like that connection of, needing to focus and kind of bring themselves back.
And then, of course, no one exists in isolation. What changes when we look at ADHD in the context of the whole family?
Everything. So everything changes. It becomes a lot less personal and a lot more systemic. And this becomes actually a huge relief for families. We stop looking only at the individual who has ADHD, because when we do that, we're accidentally making them the problem. ADHD is something that lives in the entire family system. Often one or both parents have ADHD or significant traits. The siblings could be affected. The whole family has to adapt. So usually it lands up being in very exhausting ways around this dysregulation. But when we actually zoom out and we look at the whole family, and we look at the patterns between people, not just the one person, we can say, okay, what is the cycle that keeps repeating? Who's getting dysregulated first? How does that trigger someone else? And what happens when we've got two people in the red zone, at the same time? And then you're not focusing on that one person just in isolation. It gives you a bigger picture, whole family view.
Yeah, I mean, there is a trigger from a
Yeah.
person. I know it myself,
Hmm.
mother and daughter, and, it can get a little bit difficult from time to time. Just,
Yep.
when they grow up and teenager and they want to have their own life, and we are
Hmm.
trying to support and trying to protect and trying everything, and they don't want to be protected, they don't
Of
want
course
to
not.
hear. Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not from their mom. So of
Hmm.
course this is a trigger. If mom is telling, do you have this, do you have that? I mean, it's crazy not
Hmm.
to recognize, but it's such a strong pattern. I almost feel it like it's inherent.
Yeah.
And we act like this. It's
Of course.
harmonic. I don't know, or
Yeah.
hormonal. No idea.
Yeah.
But it's really something very difficult to
Mm-hmm.
break, even if you know that you should probably, stand aside, let go,
Hmm.
and everything. But it's so difficult.
I think it's like with anything in life, right? I mean, we have our ways and our systems of doing things, and we then want to introduce a different approach and a better approach. Those changes don't happen overnight. Even if it is a change that's for the better, it takes time for the system, the whole family system as well, to get on board, to adapt. So it is possible and it's definitely worth doing, but it is something that takes time to adjust to, and but it does work. It does
Yeah,
definitely work. Yeah.
I'm sure. So, what's one thing parents could try this week?
So I would say map out your child's depleted times because this is such a practical one. And I would say, spend a week and just notice when things fall apart. What time of day is it? Was there a transition? Did they eat? How did they sleep last night? And the idea is not to try and fix anything yet, just observe that pattern because most families find that those hard moments cluster around the same conditions every time. So that's maybe low blood sugar, it could be transitions, sensory overload after school, or overtiredness. And when you see that pattern and you start recognizing it, you can protect those windows instead of fighting them. And that's such a great, important place to start. Just having that insight of, where where are things potentially going to fall apart and where can we protect that more?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really difficult because also the medicine, this
Hmm.
ADHD medicine,
Yeah.
they take away the hunger for some
Hmm.
medicine. So they forget either to eat or they are not hungry the whole
Yeah,
day. And of course, the low blood sugar happens
exactly. So
even if they
it's,
don't know, that that's the
yeah,
problem. So it's really also important for them to know that they still have to eat even if they are not hungry. It's
yeah,
important. I need to
very
eat.
important.
And so how can we parents make sure they eat enough, even if they are not hungry? I mean, you don't want to force them to eat, but is
So
there a
there's
trick?
many different ways of administering ADHD medication. So you've got, for example, you've got short acting and long acting. So if a child is not responding well to one method, you can try and switch it up, and basically they'll have the peak of the medication where they've got that capacity regulation window for a set period of time. Or if you know that they're going to take the medication, you know, plan trying to do the meals before that, or before the next dose, to get lunch in. So it, it's, figuring out what works within your system, kind of what that schedule looks like. And it's going to be different for every child and for every family.
Yeah, it's
But
really
it's,
the
yeah.
system, huh? You need a whole system.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
yeah, but everybody needs a whole system. It's
of
not
course.
only,
Yeah.
but they especially. How do you support people who feel wrong or not enough?
So I would say this is probably the part of the work that I care the most about. So many people with ADHD have been carrying with them for years. Why can't I just do this? Why is it so much easier for other people than it is for me? And they begin believing that this is an identity problem. They've been told they're lazy, they're disruptive, too sensitive, too dramatic, and they've built an identity around it. So one of the first things I like to do is reframe that story. So not in a way that we're dismissing the real difficulties, but that we're trying to make those difficulties make sense. When we understand that the brain's motivational system is wired for an ADHD brain around reward, around interest and novelty, and that it's not wired around importance. Suddenly, all the years of, well, why did I wait until the last minute to do something that I cared about? It starts to finally make sense. Our brains are wired differently. And that wasn't a character flaw. It's just neurobiology. It's a different wiring. So understanding, that we don't need to fix everything. We start, changing that relationship with yourself. And that's when we have, that ability to start learning and building new skills.
It's compassion, being
Of course.
compassionate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that alone can already release so much pressure.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
final question. If there's one thing you'd want every divergent person or their family to hear, what would it be?
So I would say that you're not broken, your child's not broken, and your nervous system or their nervous system is not broken. It's working exactly how it was designed to work. It just has different needs. And so when we understand what those needs are and we meet them, it's not a weakness, it's actually wisdom. The question was never, what is wrong with you? It's the better question should be, what does your system need? So when families start asking those questions together, not overnight, but eventually things will change. So that's what I would like to leave families with, that message.
That's wonderful. For those who feel they would like support in the area, especially parents, how can they reach you or learn more about your work and Synaps?
So they can visit synaps.ch, that's SINAPS.ch, or they can email me. It's probably better if you put a link underneath because it's
I
quite a long
will.
one. Abigail.Jankowitz@synaps.ch. And, we offer a complimentary 30-minute support call. So, if there are questions that you want to share and discuss for us to address together, that is definitely something I'd be happy to assist you with. And we've got different programs and ways that we can help. So please
You're
reach out
also,
if there is
yeah,
anything.
you're also doing assessments. If someone is unsure if they have ADHD or not. So you're doing these questionnaires
Not
and
me,
stuff.
not me personally, but
Okay.
Synapse does offer it, yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know. Last but not least, I'm curious, why is it so common that now more and more people are getting diagnosed with ADHD?
You know what, in my opinion, I think it has become more accepted, and therefore it's opening up the conversation to actually, instead of running around and pretending all day like everything is fine, I've got everything under control, and this is a huge ADHD thing, this masking, acting like everything's fine, pre-preparing for kind of every event that comes up because, we want to have that sense of control, and that takes such a huge toll on the body. I think society in general is getting a lot more open to the idea of this isn't a highlight reel. If there's something wrong, let's talk about it. If there's something I'm struggling with, let's seek help where we need help. And I think because of that, it's become more accepted, and I think people are discussing it more openly. I think we're on a good track.
Yeah, good track, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Abigail, for sharing your work and your perspective. It really opens up a much more human and holistic way of understanding neurodivergence.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our opportunity to chat today.
Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If you're taking one thing from today, maybe it's this. Instead of asking what's wrong, we start asking, what does this system need? If you would like support with that, especially as a parent, you can reach out directly to Abigail and book a call with her. And if you want more conversations like this, where we bring together body, movement, and a deeper understanding of how we function, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who might need to hear this. See you in the next conversation.